In this AI summary of Diary of a CEO, Spotify founder and CEO, Daniel Ek begins by recounting his early retirement and the emptiness he felt from a life of excess and an absence of purpose. He decided to focus on something he cared about, even though the music industry was suffering then, a journey leading to the creation of Spotify. Daniel shares his childhood as a product of a strong single mother who pushed him to be successful in an eclectic range of activities from arts to sports to broaden his skills. Yet despite being a part of various social groups, he felt he didn't fully belong anywhere because he wasn't one-sided. He was an artist, technologist, and business person. He describes his ambition as aiming high, influenced by his mother's focus on inputs rather than outcomes. To Daniel, aiming super high requires the same effort as aiming just a little higher, so one might as well aim as high as possible. He believes that many people are more afraid of failure than the prospect of succeeding, and therefore deter themselves. In discussing education, Daniel feels that the university system is a bit outdated, but acknowledges its value to certain people for structured learning or pursuing professions like law. However, for entrepreneurship, he suggests the best learning strategy is studying and working for many businesses and learning from those who excel in their fields for well-rounded skill development. This insightful conversation dives into Daniel's successes, struggles, and his potent yet relatable views on life, ambition, education, and entrepreneurship. Daniel emphasizes aiming high, continually learning and realizing one's potential as vital philosophies that have guided him throughout his life and career. In this intriguing segment, Spotify's founder Daniel Ek acknowledges that most innovative ideas are not isolated. They often build upon previous concepts. Commenting on the value of traditional education, he affirms that understanding business principles and product formation are essential skills. However, he advocates for alternative pathways, particularly for those with entrepreneurial ambitions. Grit, perseverance, and the right mentorship, he believes, can be more valuable than a formal educational background. Strikingly, Ek challenges the notion that there is a single right or wrong path to success, questioning the prescriptive narrative around university education. Self-education, he emphasizes, is crucial for young individuals interested in enhancing their skills and knowledge. He also highlights the importance of curiosity and constant learning, citing his own pattern of studying various subject domains late into the night as a prime example. Additionally, Ek shares insights into paths to entrepreneurship. While joining a startup can provide an informal yet robust learning experience, Ek notes that working in larger companies can also prove invaluable. Some individuals might prefer gathering diverse experiences, building up a savings buffer, and then diving into entrepreneurial initiatives. Ek advises young individuals to be receptive to divergent paths rather than adhering strictly to prescribed routes. Reflecting on his own journey, Ek poignantly discusses his early retirement at 23. Far from the dream, it seemed, he found his new lifestyle superficial and ultimately unsatisfying. This forced him to critically reflect on his personal values and focus on what he truly cared about, a self-inquiry that prompted him to establish Spotify with his co-founder. The two bonded over shared existential questions and resolved to create a work environment designed for continual learning, enjoyment, and innovation. As their discussions progressed, they decided on tackling the challenge of the failing music industry. Despite the daunting task, their mutual enthusiasm and willingness to risk failure led to the creation of Spotify. This anecdote paints an inspiring picture of entrepreneurship colored by risk-taking, out-of-the-box thinking, resilience, and ultimately the pursuit of authenticity. In this part of the podcast, Daniel Ek talks about finding new purpose in life after his temporary retirement gave him a sense of emptiness rather than fulfillment. Ek narrates how he felt quietly depressed 9 months into his retirement. He explains that he had to experience this unhappiness in order to truly understand that his hypothesis about what happiness meant, status, wealth, and attention, was invalid. In a relatable conversation, Ek and host Stephen Bartlett discuss how everyone is pursuing their own ideas of what happiness is, and often these ideas turn out to be flawed. Bartlett refers to this as a Ferrari syndrome. People aspire to acquire luxuries, such as a Ferrari, believing they will gain admiration, but in reality, people are impressed with the car itself, not the individual driving it. Further, Ek highlights the superficiality and shallowness associated with social status. He dispels the illusion that wealth can ensure genuine human connections. Instead, he found himself easily replaceable in situations where he was valued only for his status and wealth. This realization was a turning point in his life, leading him to seek meaningful connections and experiences that defined his individuality. In regards to understanding what makes him happy, Eck pinpoints learning and belonging as essential. He emphasizes the importance of solitary time, mentioning how he thrives on being alone, allowing him to wander in his thoughts and come up with new ideas. Eck describes himself as an introvert who loves hanging out with friends but also enjoys time alone. Finally, Eck discusses his quirky social habit. Sometimes during a social gathering, an idea strikes him, and he takes some time alone to ponder over it. Though it might seem socially inappropriate to many, Eck's close friends understand his needs perfectly. This entire segment illustrates how happiness and fulfillment depend on personal understanding rather than societal norms and expectations. It underscores the value of introspection, learning, and meaningful human connections in achieving a fulfilling life. As the conversation progresses, Daniel Eck delves into personal life and discusses how he balances romantic relationships and his tendency to get lost in his thoughts during leisurely activities. He admits that this habit often puts him up against concerns about violating his partner's preferences for spending quality time together. However, Eck reveals that his partner has a similar attachment style, which makes it easier to manage this issue. He provides advice on relationship dynamics and emphasizes the importance of finding shared interests. Speaking about developing Spotify, Eck shares the trials and tribulations he faced, mostly involving the resistance from the established music industry. He underlines the importance of perseverance, a trait which he and his co-founder Martin held onto during Spotify's formative stage. He narrates how he continued to strive in the face of repeated knockbacks from the record labels, ultimately emerging victorious when the stars aligned for his platform. Delving further into the entrepreneurial journey, Eck notes that recognizing the right moment to quit or persevere is more of an art than science. He highlights the importance of weighing potential outcomes effectively, considering the asymmetric nature of risk and rewards in entrepreneurial ventures. Eck believes it's crucial to have a mix of optimists and skeptics in a team, a concept reinforced in his experiences of managing Spotify's team dynamic. He reiterates that understanding detailed issues and being able to view the bigger picture is key to successful entrepreneurship. In terms of advice for future aspiring entrepreneurs, Eck emphasizes the importance of patience, persistence, and depth of understanding in pursuing ambitious projects. He drives home the point that with dedicated time and mindful learning, anyone could discover novel solutions, even to the most complex problems. Thus, encouraging entrepreneurs not to be daunted by the scale of the task at hand, drawing on examples from sectors as diverse as healthcare to aerospace. He asserts that success is frequently conceived in the space between optimism and skepticism. This resonates with his profound observation. The world is complex, and to simplify it too much is to not understand it. The skill lies in finding the balance between detail and abstraction, between expertise and irreverence. With that comprehensive analysis, Eck invokes attendees to continue embarking fearlessly on their entrepreneurship journeys, bolstered by wisdom, integrity, and profound understanding. Daniel Eck sheds light on his approach towards complex problem solving, citing Steve Jobs as an inspiration for his ability to understand detailed technical problems and translate them into digestible concepts. Eck further unfolds a vivid picture of his experiences chasing meetings with critical figures in the music industry, underscoring the notion that personal connections and being easy to work with can often pave the way to critical conversations. He admits that some early accounts of his pursuit of these meetings may be exaggerated, though he acknowledges instances where he flew to New York with an open calendar, making up to 20 calls a day in hopes of scheduling a time with a senior VP or CEO. He learned the vital importance of respecting and befriending gatekeepers, emphasizing how their influence can be underappreciated. Looking back at the initial investment in Spotify, Eck reveals how he invested a substantial amount of his personal wealth into the venture, amounting to around $10 million. He recognizes that this decision, from a rational perspective, was potentially reckless, but justified it as a bet on himself, expressing a sentiment that betting on oneself is some of the best advice he could give. Navigating to the topic of direct competition with Apple and its music service, Eck explains how Spotify had been anticipating this moment roughly a year in advance. The apprehension was significant given Apple's stature within the tech industry. Despite this, the team leveraged its understanding of Apple's approach, bolstering its own ecosystem rather than universally accessible service to successfully position Spotify in the face of this formidable competitor. Spotify's focus on personalization across all devices and operating systems and its integration into a diverse set of everyday platforms gave it a competitive edge. While hinting at some questionable behaviors by Apple, such as alleged delays in Spotify app updates and marginalizing competition in its store, Eck maintains his admiration for Apple as a consumer, praising its dedication to crafting high-quality products. Eck then introspectively delves into analyzing Apple's business operations. He suggests that Apple, once an underdog, has now become a Goliath. However, the tactics that positioned it as a rebel are now allegedly hindering innovation and negatively impacting consumers. Eck goes on to talk about the ruthlessness of Apple's business side and expresses his personal ethical difficulty with certain aspects of Apple's ethos. On a personal level, Eck discusses his own evolution with Spotify. He likens the company, which is now 17 years old, to a teenager struggling for independence. Eck keenly points out that Spotify is no longer purely a reflection of himself, as other leaders within the company are instilling their own values into the Spotify brand. Reflecting on his journey, Eck speaks on his transformation from a 23-year-old entrepreneur to a 40-year-old business leader. He emphasizes how this journey has changed not only his perspective on work, but also on life priorities. He admits he is still in the process of figuring out who he is, highlighting differences between his current self and his younger self. Eck also notes a significant change in his approach to corporate culture. During his early days, he merely equated culture to having a ping-pong table. As a 30-year-old, he viewed culture as important but did not really understand why, placing more emphasis on strategy. Eck, now 40, sees culture as primary, saying that it is about rewarding the positive behaviors and discouraging negative ones within a company. Eck deems culture as scalable but hard to get right. Drawing a parallel between a company and a sports team, he recognizes that cultural fit is important for the team to gel together. The podcast ends with Eck answering the traditional closing question. The advice he wishes he received when he was 21 years old is to optimize for his strengths, not cover his weaknesses, recognizing earlier that his strength lies in being a decent all-rounder. As a final note, Eck emphasizes that there are many ways to be successful, and looking inwards instead of outwards is the most guaranteed approach. Bartlett appreciates Eck's approach and praises Spotify for maintaining an underdog mentality despite being a top player. In this section of the podcast transcript, Stephen Bartlett praises Daniel Eck and Spotify for their balance of ambition and humility, qualities which can seem contradictory but are evidently embodied in Spotify's ethos. Bartlett shares a story of his trip to Sweden, where he interacted with some of Eck's colleagues, Gustav, head of product, and Alex, head of business. He was impressed by their willingness to listen to his insights as a podcaster and their subsequent action, making changes based on his feedback. Eck, appreciative of Bartlett's praise, grants credit back to Bartlett, acknowledging that Spotify has also gained from his innovative work as a podcaster. He admires the fact that Bartlett is elevating podcasting by providing a platform for these insightful conversations that educate listeners who otherwise may not have direct access to these kinds of dialogues with industry experts. The conversation then shifts to sponsorship as Bartlett introduces Shopify as a new sponsor for the podcast. Bartlett speaks to how integral Shopify has been in his business operations, becoming a tool that he uses every single day. He shares an example of DAR Overseer conversation cards, a product they recently sold, stating it was launched completely on Shopify, greatly simplifying their workflow. He emphasizes the easiness in terms of usability and how it had enabled a smooth launch. He acknowledges that technology can sometimes be challenging for his team, but in the case of Shopify, his team has found it straightforward and beneficial. In his quick advertorial, Bartlett encourages his listeners to try out Shopify for their own businesses, alluding to its capacity to revolutionize everyday business operations and take them to the next level. He closes this segment by providing a link for the listeners to access Shopify and engage with the platform. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of the Pod Slice.